At 62, I thought I'd finally earned the right to start living again. After losing my wife, I spent years buried in silence, fixing things around the house that no longer needed fixing, talking to empty rooms, pretending the loneliness was a choice. Then I met Linda. She made me feel like there was still a little light left in the world. My daughter didn't see it that way. She crashed the wedding, drunk, shaking, mascara running down her cheeks. "Replacing Mom already?" she screamed, loud enough for everyone in the church to hear. I thought the humiliation would be the worst of it. I was wrong. The next morning, I came home to an open front door and bare floors. Every photograph, every tool, every memory I'd built my life on, gone. Even my late wife's ashes. That's when I stopped being a groom and started being something else entirely. The house felt hollow. Wind moved through the empty rooms like a stranger. I walked from the living room to the kitchen, my steps echoing off stripped walls. Where my workbench once stood, there was only dust. My wife's urn had sat on the mantel for 9 years. Now a pale ring of sunlight on the wood marked where she had been. I touched the spot with trembling fingers. "Who would do this?" Linda asked behind me, her voice low with shock. She had slept at her sister's the night before, thinking to give my daughter space. Now she stood in the doorway clutching a bouquet we were supposed to place on my wife's grave. I didn't answer. The silence was answer enough. My eyes caught something white on the floor near the closet. A pawn shop receipt lay among the scattered nails and sawdust. I picked it up and felt my jaw tighten. The slip listed a set of antique planes, my father's tools, and a small gold band, my wife's ring. Outside, our neighbor Mr. Jenkins called out from his porch. "Thought you were on your honeymoon," he said, confusion creasing his brow. "Saw your son-in-law and a couple of boys loading up a truck yesterday afternoon. Figured you were moving things." I forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Thanks, Walter," I murmured, tucking the receipt into my pocket. Inside my chest, something cold settled into place. This wasn't just a drunken outburst. This was a planned betrayal. Linda touched my arm. "Should we call the police?" I looked around at the emptiness. "Not yet," I said softly, feeling the weight of the pawn ticket in my palm. Not yet. As the late morning sun cast long beams across the empty living room, I realized I'd never been angrier in my life. The humiliation at the church was nothing compared to this violation. I didn't know exactly what I would do, but I knew this. Whoever had taken my past thought they'd also stolen my future. They were wrong. The next step would be mine, and it would not be gentle. That morning I had returned from spending the night on Linda's sister's couch. We'd thought giving Elena space after the disastrous wedding was the kind thing to do. Walking into my stripped living room, I realized how wrong we'd been. My name is Franklin Ruiz, and until last week I would have described myself as a retired carpenter who still kept a tiny hardware store for company, a widower learning to smile again, and a father who believed love could patch any crack. 45 years with a hammer and chisel taught me to respect the grain of wood and the patience required to shape it. 28 years of marriage taught me that time, laughter, and shared dreams can turn a small house into a home. Then cancer took Anna away, and my world collapsed into 2 empty chairs and a lifetime of memories. For 9 years, I filled the silence with work. I fixed neighbors' fences for free. I built birdhouses until there was no space left to hang them. I kept our daughter, Elena, close with Sunday dinners and phone calls. When she married Jose, a charismatic man who insisted he'd treat her like a queen, I swallowed my misgivings. My wife had always said, "Give people the chance to prove who they are. They'll do it sooner or later." Loneliness is its own kind of hunger. When Linda walked into my hardware store asking about deck screws, her laugh warmed a part of me I thought had died. She wasn't Anna. No one ever could be. But her kindness and practical nature revived something stubborn and tender in me. We dated quietly for 2 years before deciding we didn't want to spend another winter alone. Linda suggested a small ceremony. Elena refused to attend. "It's too soon," she'd said back then. "It feels like you're erasing Mom." I thought time would soften her grief. I thought marriage would mature Jose. I thought wrong. Standing in the gutted shell of my home, the lessons of my craft came back to me. You could sand and stain an old board 100 times. But if rot had taken hold inside, it would crumble when the first storm came. Elena and Jose hadn't crumbled on their own. They'd chosen to be termites. They'd chewed through the foundation of trust I'd built for 30 years. I walked into my bedroom. The drawers were open, clothes dumped on the floor. A single photo lay face down near the bed. When I flipped it over, Anna smiled up at me from the day we'd bought this house. Paint splattered on her cheeks, a hammer in her hand, the world ahead of us. My throat closed. I slid the picture into my shirt pocket. They hadn't taken everything. Not yet. "Frank," Linda whispered from the hallway, "what are we going to do?" I looked at the pawn slip again. I thought of the neighbor's comment about Jose and some boys. A plan began to form, as rough as raw lumber. I'd need help shaping it. I'd need to learn the laws I'd always trusted other people to handle. Most of all, I'd need to confront a truth harder than oak. Sometimes the people you love take more than you can bear. The question was whether I would let them keep it. Linda brewed coffee in the kitchen we'd built ourselves. The scent did little to cut through the metallic taste of betrayal on my tongue. I sat at the dining table with the pawn ticket and the photograph. Every muscle ached, not from age, but from tension. "Frank, there's a bag of ashes under the sink." Linda's voice trembled. "It isn't Anna's urn, but it looks like fireplace ash." I stood so fast my chair scraped the tile. Opening the cabinet, I saw a paper bag with a florist's logo. Inside was cold ash mixed with wood splinters. They'd poured out my wife's remains and replaced them with fireplace debris. My hand shook as I squeezed the bag. Rage flared hot, then settled into something even more dangerous. Resolve. On impulse, I walked to the garage, which now held only oil stains and dust. The little wall-mounted bench by the utility alcove had been ripped out, but the heavy garage bench was still bolted to the studs. My toolbox was gone, but when I opened the small drawer built into that bench, I found an envelope. Inside were 2 documents, another folded receipt from Hernando's Pawn Emporium with yesterday's date and a scribbled note. "Call me. We need to talk." M. I knew one M who frequented my workshop. Marco, Jose's younger cousin. He'd been around to help Jose with odd jobs last month. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number written on the note. "Ruiz residence," a sleepy voice answered. "Marco, it's Frank. I found your note." There was a pause. "Mr. Ruiz, I didn't want to be involved, but Jose said—" "Said what?" I interrupted, my tone sharper than I intended. "Said he had your permission. Said you were getting rid of stuff." Marco's words spilled out fast. But something felt wrong. "I took pictures of the van they used. If you meet me tonight, I'll show you." "Where and when?" "The old baseball field at 9. And Mr. Ruiz. Come alone. He can't see me talking to you." I hung up, heart pounding. I hadn't been back to that field since Elena's first Little League game. Jose had promised to be there and never showed. Funny how some patterns repeat. I paced the empty kitchen until the afternoon melted into evening. Linda suggested calling the police again. I shook my head. I needed information before accusations. I needed proof before anger. And I needed to know how deep this betrayal went. Anna always said, "Measure twice, cut once." I'd been sloppy with my trust. I wouldn't be with my retaliation. By dusk, I grabbed my jacket and slipped my wife's photograph into the inner pocket like a talisman. As I locked the front door, the emptiness behind me felt like a promise and a threat. The pawn ticket, the ashes under the sink, Marco's whispered warning. They all pointed in the same direction. Tonight I would start following the trail. Whether it led to Jose alone or to Elena as well, I steeled myself for what I might find. The cafe where Elena had chosen to meet me the following morning was all mismatched mugs and reclaimed wood, the kind of place she once would have mocked for being pretentious. She sat at a corner table, eyes swollen from crying or drinking, maybe both. Jose wasn't with her. "You asked for this," she said as soon as I sat down. There was no hello, no apology. "You paraded some stranger in front of us and expected us to clap." "Her name is Linda," I replied evenly, "and she isn't a stranger to me." Elena's fingers traced the rim of her coffee cup. "Mom's only been gone 9 years. 9 years is an eternity when you wake up alone every day," I said quietly. "And your mother told me to keep living. You know that." "Don't bring Mom into this," she snapped. "You always use her memory to justify whatever you want." I took a breath. "Did you come here to talk or to throw stones?" She leaned back, crossing her arms. "You think I stole your stuff?" "Jose is furious you'd even suggest that—" "I didn't mention Jose," I said, watching her closely. "I found a pawn ticket in my workshop." I slid the slip across the table. "The number matches your wedding ring. And Mr. Jenkins saw a moving van yesterday." Her face paled. "We sold some things, yes," she admitted, voice wobbling. "You were off playing newlyweds." "We needed money. Jose's car needed repairs." "Repairs? Or gambling debts?" I asked, thinking of Marco's call. "Where are my tools, Elena? Where is your mother's urn?" She slammed her hand on the table, making the silverware rattle. "Jose said you'd turn everything on us. He said you'd pretend to be the victim. You always make yourself the hero." "So Jose speaks for you now?" She flinched, eyes darting toward the window. I noticed a faint bruise on her wrist, half hidden under her sleeve. My anger momentarily gave way to worry. "Are you okay?" I asked, softer. "Don't you dare pity me," she hissed. "You chose Linda over family." "Get out of my life." She stood up so fast her chair tipped. The barista looked over, eyebrows raised. Elena stormed toward the exit. At the door she turned back long enough to throw one last verbal dart. "You have no idea what Jose is capable of." Her words hung in the air as she disappeared down the sidewalk. She thought they were a warning, maybe even a threat. To me, they were an admission. Jose wasn't just a charismatic charmer with a rough patch. He was dangerous. And Elena was either blinded by love or trapped by fear. Either way, I couldn't count on her help. The bruise on her wrist haunted me as I left the cafe. I'd gone there hoping for clarity and found only more questions. The note in my pocket reminded me that answers might be waiting at the old baseball field tonight. The sun had started its slow descent. I had a few hours left to breathe and to prepare. I couldn't save Elena if she didn't want saving. But I could protect what remained of Anna's legacy. I could make sure Jose understood that crossing me came with consequences. The next conversation wouldn't be polite. It would be a reckoning. I sat in Richard Alvarez's office, surrounded by certificates and a wall full of case photos from his days as a public defender. Richard had been my neighbor when we were teenagers. He'd gone on to become an attorney who specialized in estate planning. We hadn't spoken in years. When I called him that morning, he'd said, "Get over here." "Bring every paper you have." I slid a folder across his desk. Inside were my will, the deed to the house, the trust Anna and I had set up after Elena was born, and the recent bank statements that showed my accounts suspiciously lighter than they should have been. Richard flipped through the documents with a practiced eye. "Good news first," he said. "The house is in a revocable living trust. You're the trustee. Elena is the remainder beneficiary, but she has no rights while you're alive. She cannot legally sell or encumber the property." "What about pawning the contents?" I asked. "The possessions inside are also part of the trust. Pawning them without your consent is theft, he replied. And if your name is on any financial account Jose has touched, we need to freeze it now. Unauthorized changes can be contested, but time is critical. He handed me a printed summary of my rights. The words felt like a lifeline. I thought trusts were just for rich people, I muttered. Trusts are for anyone who doesn't want to see their hard work disappear, Richard said. You and Anna were smart to set this up. Jose and Elena clearly didn't read the fine print. We spent the next hour calling banks, canceling my credit card, and placing fraud alerts on my accounts. Each call felt like a small act of taking back control. Richard explained how to document everything: dates, times, conversations. Evidence, he said, it wins wars. As I was leaving, he added, be careful. People do desperate things when cornered. If Jose is as volatile as you say, don't confront him alone. I thought of Marco's warning. I'm meeting someone tonight who has information, I said. He's scared of Jose. That tells me all I need to know. Richard's gaze sharpened. You're not as young as you once were, Frank. Please. I know, I said, cutting him off gently. I won't do anything stupid. But I won't do nothing either. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, the weight of the folder under my arm felt both heavy and reassuring. Trust documents, legal rights, fraud alerts, tools I'd never thought I'd need. The carpenter in me preferred saws and planes. But if this battle was fought with paper, signatures, and recorded calls, I'd learn to use them. I owed Anna that much. And I owed myself the dignity of not being stripped bare without a fight. He thinks I'm exposed. I only got more determination. My anger was quiet, but my revenge is going to be loud. You would not expect what happens next. But before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. Marco kept his word. At 9 sharp, his beat-up Honda pulled into the gravel lot of the abandoned baseball field. Floodlights from the adjacent community center cast long shadows across the cracked bleachers. I parked 2 rows away, engine off. When Marco stepped out, he scanned the dark edges of the lot like someone used to looking over his shoulder. Mr. Ruiz, he whispered, jogging toward me. I don't have much time. He handed me a flash drive and a stack of printed photos. These are from Jose's garage. He's been storing your stuff at his cousin's place. Yesterday, he loaded the last of it onto a truck. Said he knew a guy at an auction house who would move it fast. I flipped through the photos. There were my hand planes, my drill press, the cedar chest Anna's father had carved, and, my heart lurched, the brass urn that had held Anna's ashes, lying on its side in a cardboard box. Why are you helping me? I asked, meeting Marco's eyes. He kicked at a pebble, avoiding my gaze. Jose promised me a cut of whatever he made, but then he stiffed me. And I heard him and Elena fighting last night. He's got a temper when he loses at poker. Poker. Of course. Does he owe money? To everyone, Marco said. Bookies, banks, the guy who runs the poker games. That's why he started moving your stuff. He said it was just loans until he won it back. But then he got greedy. He glanced around nervously. You didn't hear this from me. Jose's been seeing a woman named Karina. She's not from around here. They meet at a motel off Highway 5 every Thursday. He's planning something big. Said once the old man signs some insurance papers, he'll be set. I don't know what he meant. My stomach twisted. Insurance papers. Life insurance? I thought of Richard's warnings and the idea chilled me. Marco, thank you, I said, gripping his shoulder. Go home. Stay away from Jose. We both heard an engine in the distance. Marco jumped. I gotta go. He sprinted back to his car and disappeared into the night. The floodlights hummed overhead. Alone in the lot, I plugged the flash drive into my phone. Videos popped up. Shaky footage of Jose loading my saws into his truck, laughing about old fools and their junk, and a photo of a crumpled flyer. Estate auction, Saturday, Hernando's Pawn Emporium. Hernando's. The name matched the pawn tickets I'd found. I took a screenshot of the address. It was 2 towns over. If Jose thought he could quietly sell off my life to strangers, he was mistaken. Driving home, I called the number of a private investigator Richard had recommended earlier. A gravelly voice answered on the second ring. Gus Turner. Mr. Turner, my name is Frank Ruiz. I need someone to look into a man named Jose Ramirez. He's my son-in-law, and I think he's trying to ruin me. There was a rustle of papers. I'm listening. For the next 15 minutes, I laid out what I knew: the theft, the gambling, the bruise on Elena's wrist, the pawn receipts, the rumor about insurance papers. Gus didn't interrupt. When I finished, he said, I'll run a quick background check tonight. We'll meet tomorrow. Bring cash. I agreed. As I hung up, a strange calm settled over me. I hadn't been prepared for this battle, but I was assembling a team, the way I used to gather workers for a house frame. Marco's photos, Gus's investigation, Richard's legal expertise, each was a plank in the scaffold I was building around Jose's scheme. Tomorrow, I'd recover what I could at the auction. Then I'd bring Jose's house of cards crashing down. The bell above Hernando's pawn emporium jangled as I stepped inside. The air smelled of metal, dust, and desperation. Rows of guitars, microwaves, and jewelry cases glinted under fluorescent lights. Behind the counter stood a thin man with gray hair and a tattoo of the Virgin Mary on his forearm. Help you? He asked without looking up from his ledger. I'm here for the auction, I replied. Name's Frank. He nodded toward a back room where a handful of men had gathered, murmuring in low voices. On a table lay my life, arranged like someone else's yard sale. There were my father's chisels, the walnut toolbox I'd made as an apprentice, and, nestled among cheap costume pieces, Anna's wedding ring, its gold dulled by fingerprints. My hand hovered above it. The urge to snatch it and run was strong, but I forced myself to follow the rules. How did you get this? I asked the owner. He shrugged. Man named Martinez dropped off a bunch of tools and some jewelry. Said his grandfather left him a garage full of stuff. Could have been the truth, could have been a lie. I don't ask questions as long as the ID matches. I'm the grandfather he was talking about. The house and tools he claimed were his, I said quietly, sliding Anna's ring onto my palm. It was heavier than I remembered, or maybe my hands were just older. This ring belonged to my wife. She died 9 years ago. The man's eyes flicked up to meet mine, surprise registering. Then that seller pawned stolen goods, he said. I'll need proof before I can release it. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a photo of Anna's hand wearing the ring, taken on our 30th anniversary. I also showed him the trust documents Richard had highlighted. He studied them, then sighed and picked up the phone. I'm Hernando, the man said, tapping the counter. Detective Hart will log the report. After he hung up, he slid the ring to me. Take it. The detective has your name on file. The tools are legally in my possession, so they go to auction. A bell chimed, signaling the auction's start. Men shuffled forward, whispering their maximum bids. I tightened my grip on Anna's ring and waited. Lot after lot passed. A trumpet, a fishing rod, a set of golf clubs, until Hernando called out, Lot 14, assorted woodworking tools. Starting at $50 100, I said, voice steady. $150, a man in a ball cap countered. $200, I replied without hesitation. Murmurs traveled through the room. I spotted Jose in the doorway, hood up, jaw clenched. He didn't bid, but his eyes drilled into the toolbox. The bidding climbed until it reached $500. Most men dropped out. A stranger with a gray beard raised a finger. $600. He glanced at me apologetically. I realized he'd been nudged by someone I couldn't see. $1,000, I said, surprising even myself. The room fell silent. Hernando glanced around. Sold to Mr. Frank for $1,000, he declared, banging his gavel. Jose's nostrils flared. He stalked toward me, his breath hot with alcohol and rage. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he hissed, keeping his voice low. "Recovering what's mine," I said calmly. I lifted my phone slightly so he could see the red recording light. "And recording every word." His eyes darted around the room. "You can't prove anything," he whispered. "I can prove you sold me stolen property under a fake name," I replied. "I can prove you emptied my house. And I can prove you've been lying to Elena." Jose leaned in, his whisper turning venomous. "You're going to regret this, viejo. You think a piece of paper will protect you? You have no idea who you're dealing with." I smiled, though every muscle in my body was taut. "Neither do you," I said softly. "Say hello to Karina for me." His face drained of color. He took a step back, then pushed through the crowd and disappeared out the side door. I slipped the ring onto my finger for safekeeping, feeling Anna's presence steady me. I gathered my toolbox and walked out of the pawn shop with the weight of wood and memory in my hands, and the knowledge that Jose had just revealed a sliver of fear. It was a small shift in power, but I felt it. The game had begun, and I wasn't playing on his terms anymore. I paid for the tools with emergency cash from a safe bolted beneath the garage bench the thieves missed. Frozen bank accounts couldn't stop this reclamation. The parking lot outside Hernando's buzzed with conversation as men loaded their purchases into pickups. I lingered by my truck, watching Jose stalk across the gravel toward his battered sedan. He didn't see me slide behind a row of dumpsters to film what happened next. Jose yanked open his car door and slammed his fist on the steering wheel. "He knows," he growled into his phone. "The old man knows." "He said your name." "How?" I couldn't hear the reply, but I recognized the name when he hissed, "I don't care what Karina says." "I'm not waiting anymore. The insurance needs to pay out now, insurance again." The word coiled around my stomach like a serpent. Jose rummaged in his glove compartment and pulled out a folder. Papers spilled onto the seat, documents with my name on them. From my hiding spot, I zoomed in with my phone. I could see a forged signature that looked like mine on a life insurance form. He had copied my handwriting well, but he'd misspelled my middle name, a detail my father had intentionally added to avoid confusion with his brother. "You're sloppy, Jose," I whispered to myself. "Too arrogant to check the details." He slammed the folder shut and lit a cigarette, exhaling smoke like anger. "We'll talk at dinner," he said before hanging up. "He's coming over." Probably to beg? Not likely. I waited until he drove away before stepping out from behind the dumpster. My phone shook in my hand, not from fear, but from adrenaline. Marco had hinted at something bigger than stolen tools. The forged insurance form confirmed it. Jose planned to profit from my death. Whether by accident or by design, he wanted me gone. I climbed into my truck and called Gus. "I have something you need to see," I said. "Meet me at my place in an hour." At home, I plugged my phone into my laptop and played the recording for Gus. His eyes narrowed at the mention of Karina and insurance. "Jose Ramirez," he muttered, scribbling notes. "Owes over $50,000 to local bookies. Works part-time at a car lot under the table. Recently submitted a new life insurance policy application on you for $200,000, naming Elena as beneficiary. He forged your signature on the consent form. Can I have that voided?" I asked. "Yes," he said, "but first we let him think it's valid. That way, if he tries something, we catch him in the act. I'll inform the insurance company and the police to flag any claim. Meanwhile, you install cameras and gas detectors, and do not, under any circumstances, be alone with him." I nodded, feeling both exposed and empowered. Jose's threat was bigger than pawning heirlooms. He'd plotted my demise. Fear licked at the edges of my resolve, but rage burned hotter. I thought of Elena's bruise on her wrist. If he hurt her, he was capable of worse. That's when I decided I wouldn't just recover my things. I would expose him fully. The dinner invitation was still on the table. I'd use it as bait. As Gus left, he turned back. "Frank," he said, "men like Jose think they're smarter than everyone. They forget one thing. Old men have nothing left to lose but their dignity, and that makes them very dangerous." He was right. Jose had taken nearly everything. All I had left was my name, my wits, and a promise to Anna that I'd protect our family. I intended to keep it. Tomorrow night at dinner, I would set the hook. Whether my daughter bit or spat it out was up to her. Either way, the current was shifting in my favor. The next afternoon, Elena sat across from me at our kitchen table, the same table where she'd once done homework, complaining about algebra and asking me to check her answers. Now she picked at a napkin, refusing to meet my eyes. "Why did you want to meet again?" she asked, voice flat. I placed my phone between us. "I need you to listen," I said, pressing play. Jose's voice poured out. "He knows. The old man knows. I don't care what Karina says. I'm not waiting anymore. The insurance needs to pay out now." Elena's head snapped up, her face drained of color. "What is this?" "It's your husband," I said, "plotting to cash in on my death. He forged my signature on an insurance policy." Gus confirmed it. She shook her head, tears welling. No, he would never. He's been pawning my tools under a fake name, Elena. I have the receipts. He's seeing a woman named Karina. He owes money to dangerous people. Do you really think he wouldn't cross this line?" Her hands trembled. "He said you'd twist everything to make him look bad. He said you'd use your money and your lawyer friends to take me away from him." "He's been twisting you," I said, leaning forward. "I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to save you." She stood up suddenly, chair scraping. "You think you're so righteous," she snapped. "You replaced Mom like she was an old chair, and now you want to control my marriage. I'm not going to divorce him because you don't like him." I pushed the trust documents toward her. "This isn't about like. This is about legality and safety. You have no right to my house or my money until I'm gone. But Jose is trying to take them anyway. That's a crime." She didn't even glance at the papers. "I don't care about your money," she said through clenched teeth. "I care about my husband. If you report him, you'll ruin our lives." I swallowed hard. "If I don't, he might ruin mine. Permanently." Her eyes filled with tears. "You always think the worst of people." "Maybe Jose made mistakes, but he loves me. At least he doesn't abandon family like you did." "When did I abandon you?" I whispered, genuinely hurt. "When you chose Linda over Mom's memory. When you stopped making every decision about me." She wiped her cheeks angrily. "I'm done talking." She stormed toward the door. At the threshold she paused, turned back and said, "If you go to the police, don't expect me at your funeral." Her words were meant to wound. They did. I watched her leave, feeling like I'd lost her to a man who was slowly poisoning her against me. I also knew that no matter what she said, I couldn't ignore the evidence of my own ears. Saving her might mean losing her temporarily. The alternative was losing both of us forever. Jose's threatening text buzzed my phone an hour later. "Dinner at 8. Come alone." My reply was brief. "I have nothing to hide." He was expecting weakness. He heard softness. He missed the edge. He would find something else entirely. I'm no longer a friendly pushover. My revenge is going to turn his life upside down. Gus spread his findings across my dining table like blueprints. Bank records, credit reports, surveillance photos. A mosaic of deception. "He has 3 credit cards maxed out," Gus said, tapping the documents. 2 payday loans. He's been gambling at offshore sites using your IP address to hide his tracks. "See here?" He pointed to log-in records. My heart pounded. He'd been in my house more times than I realized. "He also submitted a new life insurance application at the insurance company," Gus continued. He listed Elena as primary beneficiary and himself as contingent. He forged your signature and had Marco's cousin witness it. The company flagged it as suspicious because your middle name is misspelled. I exhaled slowly. How do we stop it? Already filed a fraud claim, Gus replied. They will not honor any payout. But Jose doesn't know that, which makes him dangerous. He may accelerate whatever he's planning. I thought of the gas line in my basement, the old furnace that had groaned for years. Could he start a fire? He could, Gus said bluntly. That's why we're installing these. He held up small black cameras no bigger than a button and a set of carbon monoxide and gas detectors. One in the living room, one in the basement near the furnace, one by the back door. They stream to your phone and to a cloud account I control. We spent the afternoon drilling discrete holes and running wires along baseboards. Linda watched quietly, handing us screws and offering coffee. Her presence was an anchor. By evening, my house was rigged like a fortress. As the sun dipped, I sat at the kitchen table drafting a new will. Richard had sent over the template. I named my grandchildren, Elena's 2 kids, as the sole beneficiaries of my estate, managed by Linda if anything happened to me. Elena and Jose were excluded until further notice. Are you sure? Linda asked gently, reading my shaky handwriting. I'm sure of one thing, I said. If Jose is willing to kill me for money, I'm not giving him a penny voluntarily. My phone buzzed, a message from Jose. Dinner at 8. Bring the papers you keep bragging about. No Linda. I turned to Linda. You stay at your sister's tonight, I said. Take Anna's photo album with you. Hide it. I'm not risking losing anything else. Her eyes searched mine. Be careful. Always, I replied, kissing her forehead. My mind replayed the footage of Jose whispering about insurance. My heart replayed Elena's accusation that I was abandoning her. It felt like walking a beam with no net. One misstep and everything could fall apart. But I'd been balancing beams since I was 20. I knew where to place my weight. Tonight, I would step carefully, and I would record every word. Jose answered the door of his small rental with a smile that never reached his eyes. Frank, he said, like we were old friends. Come in. The living room smelled of cheap cologne and burned onions. Elena sat on the couch, hands folded in her lap. Her eyes flicked to mine, then away. A table was set with 3 plates and a roast that looked undercooked. The kids were at a neighbor's for the evening. 3 adult settings gave our conversation no place to hide. You didn't bring Linda, Jose noted, almost disappointed. You said not to, I replied. I placed my phone on the buffet, angled toward us, and pressed record. For the record, I'm recording this conversation. He didn't object. You also wanted to see the papers. Here they are. I set the trust documents and the new will unsigned on the table. He poured himself a generous glass of whiskey. You always did like paperwork, he mocked. While men like me prefer action. He raised his glass. To family. I said nothing. Instead, I slid Anna's ring across the table. It gleamed under the overhead light. Jose's hand jerked toward it, then stopped. Where did you get that? He asked, voice tight. From Hernando's, I said calmly. Where you sold it. Along with my tools. I bought them back. He laughed, though his eyes darted between Elena and the ring. So you wasted money proving a point. No, I said, leaning forward. The point is this. I know about your gambling. I know about Karina. I know about the life insurance application and the forged signature. And I know about the gas leak you plan to cause when we're all asleep. Elena's fork clattered onto her plate. What gas leak? She whispered, turning to Jose. His mask slipped for a fraction of a second. Rage flared, then vanished behind a chuckle. He's making things up to scare you, Jose said smoothly. See? He wants you to think I'm a monster. Don't let him. I kept my voice steady. Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow, you're going to return everything you took. You'll go to the police and confess to pawning my property. You'll cancel the insurance. And you'll leave Elena and my grandchildren alone." He leaned back, arms crossed. "Or what? You'll call the cops? They won't believe you. You're just an old man angry about his junk." "Actually," I said, picking up my phone, "they will. Because this old man has been recording this entire conversation. And because a private investigator has footage of you admitting intent to kill me. And because your insurance form misspelled my middle name. And because, as of this afternoon, all of this evidence has been emailed to my lawyer and to the police department." Jose's face drained of color. He shot up from his chair. "You think you're clever," he spat. "You think—" Elena stood too, voice shaking. "Is any of it true, Jose? The gambling, the insurance, Karina?" He grabbed her arm hard. "Don't listen to him." "Let go of her," I said quietly, standing as well. My hand was steady on the table. "Elena, you can leave with me now, or you can stay. But I'm leaving, and I'll see you both tomorrow at the police station." Elena looked between us, eyes wide. She shook off Jose's grip and walked to the door. Her shoulders quaked. She paused, hand on the knob, then whispered, "I'll think about it." I nodded once and stepped outside. The cold night air slapped my face. Behind me their voices rose and fell. I couldn't make out words, but the tone told me everything. Jose's fury, Elena's confusion. I walked to my truck, heart pounding, and dialed Gus. "He took the bait," I said. "Be ready." Back at my place, the cameras and gas detectors were ready. The dinner had been tense, but the trap was set. The next move belonged to him. I doubted he'd choose wisely. At 2:13 a.m., my phone buzzed with a notification. Motion detected. Basement camera. I jolted awake in the guest room of Linda's sister's house. The screen showed Jose's figure slipping through my back door, a flashlight beam cutting across the kitchen floor. He wore gloves and a dark hoodie. My heart hammered, but my mind was clear. I dialed Gus. "It's happening," I whispered. "He's in my house." "Stay put," he whispered back. "I'm 2 minutes away. Police are on their way too." Through the camera feed, I watched Jose descend the basement stairs. He knelt by the gas line and twisted the valve with practiced ease. My jaw clenched. He truly planned to fill the house with gas and hope for a spark. Maybe he would leave a candle burning. Maybe he would come back later to check on me and be a grieving son-in-law when the house exploded. The thought made my skin crawl. Suddenly, a beam of light flooded the basement. "Police! Hands where we can see them!" officers shouted. Jose froze, then bolted toward the back door. 2 officers met him at the top of the stairs, with Gus in the yard watching. "Jose Ramirez, you are under arrest for attempted arson, insurance fraud, and theft," the sergeant said, voice cold. The officers wrestled Jose to the ground. He cursed and spat, but he was no match for men trained for this. "You set me up!" he screamed as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. I stayed where I was, miles away, watching the live feed. "No," I whispered to my screen. "You set yourself up. I just documented it." He lunged toward the officers, but the cuffs held him back. "Elena will hate you forever," he hissed at the camera as if he could see me. "She'll never forgive you for this." "Better hated and alive than loved and dead," I muttered. The officers dragged him outside. Gus stayed behind, turning off the gas and opening windows. The faint smell of rotten eggs dissipated. My hands shook, more from adrenaline than fear. "You okay?" Gus texted a minute later. I typed back, "Yes." "He would have killed me." "He would have tried," Gus replied. "You made sure he didn't succeed." Elena pulled into my driveway and saw the cruisers and Jose in the back seat of a squad car. She called me, voice breaking. "What happened?" she cried when I answered. "He tried to burn my house down," I said softly. "We have video of it." Jose yelled something unintelligible in the background. Elena's knees buckled. "Why didn't you tell me?" she sobbed. "Why didn't you? I could have stopped him." "Would you have believed me?" I asked gently. She said nothing, just wept into the phone. For the first time in weeks, her tears weren't angry. They were broken. The ambulance lights flashed red and blue on my driveway, painting everything in harsh colors. As officers read Jose his rights, he glared at the camera with hatred that could have ignited the gas himself. I watched with something he couldn't understand. Pity. He'd chosen greed over family and was facing consequences. For the first time since my wedding, I felt a sliver of peace. The battle wasn't over, but the most dangerous threat had been contained. Now came the messy part, sorting through the wreckage and rebuilding what could be saved. 3 weeks later, we sat around a polished oak table in a mediation room at the courthouse. Elena was flanked by a court-appointed counselor. Jose's chair was empty. He had been denied bail and attended via video feed from the county jail. His image flickered on the monitor, gaunt and sullen. "Mr. Ruiz," the mediator began, "you have filed charges for theft, fraud, and attempted arson. Are you willing to settle?" I glanced at Richard, who nodded. "Yes," I said, sliding a thick folder across the table. "On 2 conditions." I listed them calmly. All stolen items would be returned or their value repaid. Elena would renounce any claim to my estate until after my death and would agree to counseling. In exchange, I would not oppose a plea deal recommending a shorter sentence for Jose on the condition that he plead guilty. Jose's public defender whispered in his ear. On screen, Jose's jaw tightened. He leaned toward the camera. "You think you're merciful," he sneered. "You're just saving face." "This isn't about mercy," I replied. "It's about boundaries." "You crossed mine. Now I'm building a wall." Elena stared at the table, tears silently rolling down her cheeks. "I never wanted any of this," she whispered. "I just wanted us to be happy." "Happiness built on lies crumbles," the counselor said softly. "This is a chance to rebuild on truth." Jose exhaled sharply. "Fine," he spat. "I'll sign whatever you want." "It's not like I have a choice." Richard slid the agreement toward Elena. Her hand trembled as she picked up the pen. "This doesn't mean I don't love you," I whispered, leaning close. "It means I love you enough to protect you from him and from yourself." She nodded, lips pressed tight, and signed. The sound of her pen scratching paper was both an end and a beginning. Jose's digital signature appeared on the screen seconds later. The mediator gathered the papers. "We have an agreement," she said. "The court will finalize Jose's plea in 2 weeks. Elena, the counselor, will schedule sessions with you. Mr. Ruiz, your trust remains intact." Walking out of the courthouse, I felt lightheaded. The sun seemed too bright after the fluorescent mediation room. Richard clapped my shoulder. "You did the right thing," he said. "It doesn't feel like winning," I admitted. "Justice rarely feels like victory," he replied. "It feels like balance." By week's end, the police returned items recovered under the plea. Among them, Anna's urn, empty but home. At home, I placed that empty urn back on the mantel. The ashes were gone forever, but the urn still marked her place in our lives. Linda stood beside me, her hand entwined with mine. "You kept your promise to her," she whispered. "Not yet," I said, looking around the partially restored room. "But I'm closer." A knock on the door interrupted us. It was Elena, eyes swollen, clutching a small cardboard box. "These are your photographs," she said quietly, "and Mom's recipe book. I never meant to lose them. I don't know what I was thinking." I took the box gently. "Thank you," I said. There was more to say, apologies to be made and forgiveness to be given, but not all at once. Healing, like woodworking, required patience and precision. We stood there awkwardly, then she stepped forward and hugged me. For the first time in months, I hugged her back without suspicion. The legal reckoning was over. The emotional one would take much longer. Spring crept into the hills, bringing with it soft rains and green shoots. I spent my mornings sanding the gouges Jose's men had left in my hardwood floors. Each swipe of sandpaper felt like erasing a tiny bit of anger. Linda and I rehung picture frames, placing each memory back where it belonged. Anna's smile gazed down from the mantel again, this time next to a photograph of Linda and me cutting cake at our quiet courthouse wedding, the ceremony we'd held in the judge's chambers after canceling the church fiasco. On a sunny afternoon, I drove to the cemetery. The ground was damp, the air thick with the scent of lilacs. I stood before Anna's headstone and spoke softly. "I did it," I said. "I protected what we built. It wasn't pretty, and it hurt. But I did it." I told her about Jose's arrest, about Elena's tears, about the updated estate plan that ensured our grandchildren would one day benefit from our labor. I told her about Linda's unwavering support. I asked for her forgiveness for moving on, even as I promised I would always carry her memory. The breeze rustled the leaves in response, or maybe that was just what I needed to hear. Days blended into weeks. Elena started attending counseling sessions. She and the kids came over for dinner on Sundays again. She spoke little at first, then more as trust cautiously regrew. Jose's trial date approached. He pleaded guilty and accepted a 5-year sentence. Karina disappeared, rumored to have moved to another state. The bookies turned their attention to other debtors. The fire department inspected my furnace and declared it safe. One afternoon, a letter arrived. It was from Jose, mailed from the county jail. The envelope sat unopened on my workbench for a day. Curiosity and perhaps some sense of closure pushed me to tear it open. His handwriting was sloppy. "Frank, I'm sorry. Not because I got caught, but because I hurt Elena. I thought I could control everything. I was wrong. Prison gives you time to think. I won't ask for forgiveness. I know I won't get it. But I hope one day Elena will live a good life without me messing it up. Jose." I folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. It didn't absolve him, but it acknowledged some responsibility. I handed it to Elena at our next dinner. She held it like a fragile thing, then slipped it into her purse. "Maybe I'll read it one day," she said. Life didn't snap back to what it had been. Too much had been broken. But it settled into a new shape. Linda and I planted a small garden together. I taught my grandson to sand a board smooth. Elena started taking night classes in accounting. Each of us, in our own way, was building something new from the wreckage. 6 months passed. Jose began serving his sentence in a facility upstate. Elena and the kids moved into a small apartment across town, downsizing from the house they'd shared with Jose. She found a job at a local credit union and called often, sometimes just to share a funny story about the children. Therapy was helping her untangle years of manipulation. She rarely mentioned Jose. When she did, it was with a clarity that surprised me. Linda and I settled into a rhythm that felt like home. We drank coffee on the porch in the mornings, our hands entwined. I volunteered twice a week at the community center, teaching young men how to use tools safely. When they asked about the scars on my hands, I told them stories about houses built, not betrayal endured. It felt good to create again without worry of someone stealing the fruits of my labor. News of Jose's sentencing reached our town. 5 years for attempted arson, fraud, and theft. Some said it was too lenient. Others said it was justice. I stayed silent. Justice wasn't just about years served. It was about restoring balance. Jose had lost his freedom. We had regained ours. Elena attended the sentencing hearing, but left before Jose was taken away. She told me afterward, "I needed to see that consequences exist. For him, and for me." One late summer evening, Elena knocked on my door with a gift bag. Inside was a framed drawing. It depicted my house with a tall fence around it, flowers blooming inside, and a sign that read, "No termites allowed." I laughed, the sound surprising me. Elena grinned sheepishly. "Art therapy," she explained. "We were supposed to draw boundaries." "It's perfect," I said, hanging it next to the mantel. It was a reminder of how far we'd come and of the boundaries we'd built. Not walls to keep love out, but fences to keep harm away. Life was not without pain. Some mornings I still woke up reaching for Anna. Some afternoons I found myself staring at the wrench scratches Jose had left on the basement wall where he'd tried to sabotage the gas line. But pain coexisted with gratitude. Gratitude for Linda's steady presence, for Richard's legal acumen, for Gus's watchful eye, for Marco's conscience, for Elena's courage to heal. As autumn leaves began to fall, I found myself looking forward to things again, not just the next problem to fix. My hands, though arthritic, still loved the feel of sandpaper and warm mugs. My heart, though scarred, still beat with hope. On the first crisp day of October, Linda and I took the grandchildren apple picking. We walked rows of trees heavy with fruit, sunlight dappling the ground. My youngest granddaughter clutched my hand and asked, "Grandpa, why are your hands so rough?" "Because they've built a lot," I replied, "and because sometimes they've held things they shouldn't have let go of." She frowned, not understanding, then smiled and handed me a shiny red apple. Children are good at accepting answers without needing the full story. Later, as the kids napped in the car, Linda rested her head on my shoulder. "Are you happy?" she asked softly. I looked out at the orange and gold hills, at the reflection of my weathered face in the window. "Happy and sad at the same time," I admitted, "but mostly at peace." Back home, I took down the drawing of the fenced house and studied it. Boundaries had saved my life. Literal walls to keep Jose's fire out, and metaphorical fences to keep his manipulation at bay. I thought about forgiveness, that word people love to throw around like confetti. I wasn't sure I'd forgiven Jose. I didn't know if I ever would. What mattered was that I'd protected the people I loved and learned that protecting them sometimes meant protecting myself first. Elena and I still had work to do. Trust would take time. There were apologies to be given, habits to unlearn. But we were talking, really talking, for the first time in years. She confided that she felt guilty for not seeing Jose's true nature sooner. I confessed my own guilt for perhaps leaning on her too much after Anna died. We agreed to move forward slowly, like you do when walking on ice. Test each step, hold each other's hand, and be ready to pull back if the surface cracks. Now, as I sit at my workbench with a cup of coffee and Anna's photo propped nearby, I reflect on the past year. The betrayal, the investigation, the traps and confrontations, the legal battles, the gradual healing. Each scene carved deep grooves in me. But those grooves have made me stronger, like how seasoning a cutting board makes it less prone to warping. My life has been sanded by grief and sealed by experience. If you were in my shoes, if your own child tore through your home and tried to erase your life because someone whispered poison in her ear, what would you do? Would you fight as I did, risk losing her to save her? Or would you turn the other cheek and hope love alone could change a poisonous heart? Please share your opinions in the comments.
My grandpa's words really happened. I believe him. If you want more true tales stories like this, hit subscribe.